Welcome back to the Bullpen podcast, where we spotlight local business leaders and the real-world strategies that drive their success. Today, we're sitting down with Patrick Fanning, CEO and principal engineer at Legacy Design and Development, a company that helps early-stage medical device startups navigate the complex path from idea to market. Patrick isn't your typical consultant. He's a hands-on growth partner who's helped turn napkin sketches into manufacturable products, saving startups time, money, and headaches along the way. We'll dig into what it takes to innovate in such a highly regulated industry and how to lead through complexity and what lessons any business leader can learn from the way Patrick builds partnerships, not just products. Patrick, welcome to the Bullpen. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. What really drew you into that world of medical device design, and kind of how did that passion turn into the business you're running today?
Absolutely. So right away out of college, while in college, I was an intern at a packaging design company that focused on medical device packaging. So I was doing everything from initial meetings with the clients, working through prototyping, and then controlling those projects from cradle to grave. That's kind
Mm.
of where I fell in love with medical device. It was seeing the innovations coming out of the big OEMs when we're solving these complex problems, whether it's heart disease or stroke patients or just next generation implantable devices. It was just really exciting. And so then as I kind of left college and moved into my professional space, I ended up working at that same company and stayed there for 6 years.
Okay.
And then from there, made the leap into injection molding, program management, tool design, things of that nature, and got a little more
Uh-huh.
in-depth understanding of what it takes to bring a device to market. And kind of the passion behind it was while I was in the near the end of my career in corporate, I was seeing the same consistent struggles with some of our larger clients where our programs weren't ready. The CADs didn't make sense. The blueprints didn't match. There was no material selection. There was no thought into DFM or design for assembly, design for manufacturing. And the light bulb kind of went off that I knew that if some of our bigger clients were having these struggles, I knew the startups, the smaller OEMs, the innovators in their garage were having the same struggles and they likely didn't have a resource to help them. So I founded my business to work hand in hand and help bring those next generation devices into the marketplace.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, yeah, talk about identifying a need, right? And you emphasize being a growth partner instead of a traditional consultant. What does that distinction mean in practice, and kind of why does it really matter to your clients?
So I don't know, growing up, working in my field, I'm sure you see this too. The consultant kind of has this stigma, right? We know better than you.
Mhm.
We've seen this up before. We're solving problems that your team can solve. And that's not who I am. I'm looking to come in, partner with these. Traditionally, it's startups, smaller OEMs, people who are innovating, and they don't have the resources. They don't have the knowledge base, right? I specialize in design for manufacturing, injection molded components for next generation devices. And so my whole goal is to, again, partner with them, educate them on what it takes, what the processes are. These are the headaches that we're going to stumble upon. Be there with them as they go through this. And as they continue to grow with them. So when we start working on their next generation device, again, we've already built those inroads into with our contract manufacturing partners, sales, marketing. We're in this for the long haul, and that's kind of how I differentiate the consultant. I'm coming in to do a job versus I'm coming in, I want to help you grow. I want to grow with you, and I want to see you succeed.
Yeah, and a little bit of what you talked about already, but kind of the scenario, even just at a really big firm, and kind of running into some issues and realizing that that is going to be effective at a startup. And I mean, medical device development is incredibly complex.
It is.
What's, I guess, the biggest challenge startups face when going from idea to production, and kind of how do you help them along from
Sure.
to kind of overcome that?
So some of the big struggles that I see is they get too far down the road with ID. ID is important. And when I mean ID, I mean industrial design. Industrial design is important. That's what's
Okay.
sexy. That's what sells. That's what brings people to us. It's important, but I think more ultimately, or what's more important is that we consider what the end of the road looks like. What's our What's our regulatory path? What does our FDA submission look like? Is the thing that we're designing or developing, is it manufacturable? And so I see time and time again, I've seen it. These small OEMs or these startups, they've got beautiful concepts, beautiful renderings, but they're just not manufacturable. And so it's kind of getting them over that. I don't want to call it a stumbling block, but that, maybe they've already made a giant investment in this. And so we've got to swallow that pill and move forward. So that's kind of where my design for manufacturing principles are different. And that's kind of one of the big things that I preach with my clients is we got to think about the ending before we begin.
Got it. Yeah. And I think obviously with your experience at places like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, I mean, going through that process for, I guess, maybe some of those bigger firms as well, how did that experience really help shape the way you approach helping those smaller early stage teams?
I mean, again, it's kind of hand in hand with planning for the finish line. So I've seen the stumblings, I've seen the failures, I've seen the struggles that these big OEMs have. Boston Scientific, Medtronic, Johnson & Johnson, to name a few, right? There are a lot of universal learnings that come from them. How do we get through regulatory? How do we navigate our manufacturing partners? How do we line up strategic partners to fulfill the rest of the assembly or get a marketing channel? So a big one is understanding the risk, right? They've got teams that are dedicated to risk mitigation, risk management, customer supply, relations. And so I've seen and I understand the needs and the struggles that go into that. And I can apply those learnings on a smaller scale to my clients. And again, kind of springboard that development process and that understanding and risk mitigation that comes along with the work that we've done at those bigger companies.
Yeah, and I mean, you talked about it there a little bit too, and earlier in our conversation. Obviously, kind of away from that very practical sense of how this stuff gets developed, but I mean, leadership lessons. What leadership lessons have you learned from guiding those investors and startups through really high stakes product development?
Honestly, it's kind of a simple one, and it sounds silly to say it, but sometimes we just need to make a decision to move forward. I mean, we can hem and haw about, does this label look right? Is my color correct? Do I have a box? Sometimes we just need to make a decision, move forward, so we don't lose the momentum and lose our place in line, so to speak. We can't let little decisions that might seem impactful bog us down. We just need to move forward. We can come back. There are things that can be revised, changed, updated before we get to the market, right? But sometimes we just need to be in the market and test the market, and they're going to, we might learn something from them. But if we don't just move forward and make a decision, we won't get to those learnings.
That kind of segues nicely, I think, into just a general conversation about innovation. Innovation in healthcare really collides with regulation quite a bit. And like you mentioned, some of the bigger players, they have a lot of regulatory teams. But kind of in your circumstance, helping these startups along with who maybe don't have those types of teams, how do you balance that create with compliance in the long run?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I try and get my partners involved right away. Again, I'm kind of a one-man show right now. We're looking to scale this year. But I've got partners and relationships in the market with quality and regulatory folks, and we get them involved immediately. If we don't know what our pathway looks like or the runway looks like, it doesn't matter how creative or innovative our idea is. If we don't have a go-to-market strategy, we're kind of up a creek, so to speak. So I like to get my partners involved immediately to make sure that we see our roadmap, and we can clear any roadblocks that might be in our way to allow us then to be innovative within our space.
Yeah. A lot of founders struggle with scaling. What kind of key milestones or signals tell you that a startup is ready to move from that prototype all the way to commercialization? Or where do you kind of see some spots where you say, all right, maybe we need to spend a little bit more time at this point to kind of understand what the very next step is?
To kind of piggyback off of what I just said, it's understanding our regulatory roadmap. What does that look like? Do we have, do we know that this is a submittable device? Do we understand what it's going to take to get there? But the other big ones are, do we have IP control? Do we have a patent on our idea? Do we have a trademark? Do we need a trademark? Yeah, again, so is our market understood? Have we done any market research to understand that, wow, this might be an amazing idea? Is there actually a market for this? Is anybody going to buy this? I work with a lot of doctors, and unfortunately, they ultimately like to think that, their idea is the best way. And it's great that they have that struggle, but we need to understand that, okay, you have the problem. Does another doctor have a problem? Does another hospital have that same problem? And is there a market for that? And then, can we get that penetration that we require? So those are kind of some of the big signals. And again, we can help with that. If you need some assistance in IP or understanding your regulatory roadway or roadmap or whatever that might be, we can help you with that. But those are
Hmm.
kind of some of the key indicators that we are ready to move forward and take the next leap.
Yeah, and just kind of like a little bit of another real world example as well. Without sharing anything, obviously you can't share in terms of your relationship with your clients. But is there a project or two that you can share that really stand out to you, where maybe somebody kind of did take that leap of faith, like you said, and just making the decision, or really understanding the regulatory roadmap to understand, all right, now's our time to move on this. Is there
Yeah,
any
exactly.
examples that kind of come to your brain right
I've
away?
got a fun one that kind of piggybacks on a bunch of different things that
Okay.
we've been talking about. So I'm working with a client, and we're working on a new device for a laboratory setting. Can't go into
Hmm.
much more about that, but they invested heavily. Again, this is kind of that trap that they fell into. They invested heavily into industrial design without really understanding a clear pathway into manufacturing. So luckily, fortunately for me, I've been working on some other projects, and I heard about this. So, well, tell me a little bit more about it. And so I kind of got some background
Hmm.
on it and I started looking into it. And like, this manufacturing might be. So we ultimately ended up on heavy gauge thermoforming. It was the perfect balance of ability to get the industrial look that they were looking for, but with a relatively low cost to entry price point with the manufacturing process. Tooling's not that terribly expensive as opposed to like a resin cast or
Hmm.
machining or billet or whatever it might be. It turned out to be a really good investment, I think. I think it's going to be a really neat piece when it's sitting in the laboratory space. It's clean, it's crisp, it's modern. So that was kind of a fun one. And then another one I'm kind of working on is, well, again, it's intended to be an over-the-counter diagnostic tool. If you think about how diabetics have to test for their blood sugar levels and glucose, it's kind of a riff
Hmm.
off of that for another segment. And the whole point was there's multiple ways to do this, and we took the stance of how can we get that into one unit. And so we've been diligently working on that. We're kind of expecting to be in the market, hopefully, I would say next year, maybe our 2027, but
Hmm.
we'll see. So that's kind of a fun one where we're trying to combine a bunch of different accessories and user interface components and get that into one simple device that anybody can use.
Yeah, those are really interesting. Yeah, those are some great examples. So, and I guess a little bit back to that first example, you've described yourself as someone who walks alongside your clients. What does that effective mentorship look like to you? And kind of how do you foster trust during those high pressure phases? Maybe in a scenario where you haven't worked with that client before, and maybe also when you're trying to I guess kind of keep that relationship going. You've had a
Right.
few projects under your belt with them.
So kind of like what I talked about at the beginning of our discussion here, I walk alongside my clients. Again, I want to be their partner. I want to help them, by removing roadblocks or stumbling blocks that are in their way, hopefully identify the risks before they even see them so that they can focus on, growing their business, ensuring that they've got the market share or their funding or whatever it is that they want to focus on. Let me and my team worry
Mhm.
about the design, the development, prototyping. We can shoulder that. But also we want to be a wealth of knowledge. We want to educate our clients on, okay, while we're talking about design for manufacturing, have you considered these materials, right? There might be some cost savings, or there might be some intrinsic properties that we can pick up if we explore other materials. Maybe there is a sterilization process that you weren't thinking about, but you know, I can help them understand that if we sterilize it in this fashion, that might actually ruin our product and not just destroy the bad chemicals or enzymes on that biologically, but also physically. So I'm trying to again partner with them and help them understand that I'm not just here to, get my job done and move on. And so I think that trust kind of comes when I'm able to identify these risks and these roadblocks and these items before they even see it. And then when we get there and like, this is what I was telling you about. Here's our plan for this. This is why we talked about this. And we can move through that process very quickly. Again, as opposed to being bogged down and stuck. We can't make a decision
Mhm.
on how we want to move forward.
Yeah, and that's a great. I think it's a great lead into my last question here for you, Patrick, and especially just kind of with the same sentiment of their success is your success. Just for any listeners who aren't in the med tech world as well, what's one principle from your field that you think every business leader or most business leaders could really apply to improve how they innovate or execute with their business?
Absolutely. It's clarity creates understanding. If we know where we're going, if we know how we're going to get there, there might be some forks in the road that we need to navigate. But as long as, again, we think about the end at the very beginning, we know how we're going to get there, we understand the roadmap, it makes that decision-making process way simpler. We're on the same page. We know where we're going. I don't know how many more analogies I can say, but you get what I'm saying. So it's just
Yep.
that if we can be clear and concise about what it is, what the mission is, and where we're going, it makes that journey a lot easier.
Yeah, well, that's great, and thanks so much, Patrick. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you for joining us. Some really insightful stuff, obviously, on leadership, innovation, clarity, and client success, on just really how to guide teams through the unknown. For our listeners, if you want to learn more about legacy design and development or connect with Patrick, check out his website, legacydnd.com. That's 2 D's at the end before .com. As always, thanks for tuning in to the Bullpen podcast, where we bring you the strategies, stories, and lessons from business leaders who are out there making it happen every single day. Until next time, thanks for listening.